Hello, football family. Welcome into Huddle It Up Films. Today we're talking about Ravens tight end Josh Oliver, a new addition to the team this offseason. And joining me today is Dev Panchwaugh. Hopefully I said that correctly, Dev. It's the first time that I'm meeting Dev, but I've read plenty of his work. I'm sure a lot of you have too. So, Dev, could you please introduce yourself, correct me on the name, and let us know where we can find your work?
Yeah, you got it, Jason. Dev Panchwaugh, and
Nice.
you're not the only one. But it's no, you're pretty much on the money there. As far as where people can find my work, Russell Street Report is where you would go. I basically work on more so feature pieces. I guess just kind of specific pieces that come together, player profiles like the one we're going to talk about, or position groups. So as the season comes closer, I'll ramp it up even more. And then people can also find me at Dev Panchwaugh on Twitter.
Definitely a good follow on Twitter. You guys probably know by now I'm a Twitter person. So I've gotten into that later. It took me a while, but I finally got around to it. But Dev wrote this piece on Josh Oliver, and I thought it was a really interesting one. I'm glad to have him on today. Obviously, the Ravens' third tight end is an open spot, Dev. Like, of course, we have Andrews and Boyle, but nobody really sticks out besides that. I heard there was a lot of buzz at OTAs about Oliver.
Yeah, so far the early returns are positive on Oliver, and I think he actually had the opportunity to get some reps because Boyle's still recovering from his injury. I believe Andrews was very limited, if not, I don't think he really got any reps, if I'm not mistaken. So it was kind of the Josh Oliver show, and then they obviously have a surplus of tight ends that are duking it out. He's going to have some competition, but he's the one that really stood out amongst the OTA observers, reporters that were there. So that's a good thing for him coming out the gate. And I think pretty much everything has been positive, caught everything, looked good, didn't have the pads on. So you can only glean so much from it. And I made a point of that in my piece, that once the pads come on, that's when we'll find out.
Yeah, definitely have to have the ability to block, or else it really doesn't change the personnel. If you're just out there to receive, they're just going to put a defensive back on you, and you don't get those mismatches. But I mean, we got him pretty cheap. I mean, as pretty much as cheap as you can get. And for a player that was drafted in the third round 2 years ago, that kind of surprised me because his upside is there. He had some freak injuries, but yeah, with the trade being able only a seventh rounder. Why do you think that was, or are you concerned about his injury history? I guess is a good way to put it.
It's a good question. It's something I kind of dove into a little bit more putting this article together, and it's interesting because it just seems like freak injuries to me. Doesn't have much of an injury history going back to college, but he suffered a grade 2 hamstring starting in his rookie year, missed the first 6 games. Then he had a tailbone fracture right after that. So it's just almost a confluence of problems. And then to start the 2020 year, he broke a bone in his foot. And the thing about that is because of the timing of it, he had to be placed on IR without an opportunity, without a designation to return, because it happened so early. I think it happened way before the 53-man cut down. So to answer your question, I'm oddly enough not super concerned, because I just think he's had injury riddled first 2 seasons, but there's nothing there that comes across as like it's this guy that has any kind of major alarms in terms of like he doesn't have soft tissue injuries, or he doesn't have like anything that shows that he is. I mean, he's made out of. If you want to say he's made out of glass so far in his NFL career, I think that's totally fair. Like if people wanted to say that, but in college he stayed healthy. And then getting back to real quick, the draft 2019, he was the 5th tight end drafted in that class. So that shows you his talent level. And I am surprised that they were able to get him on the cheap to that level, because again, his work ethic has been complimented by coaches before. So it's not, there's no other than the injury problem. There's nothing there from a character standpoint as well.
Yeah, my take on the injuries is kind of the same. If you see somebody that's had ACL problems, uh, PCL problems, both knees, it's like almost like if they hurt one, you're waiting for the other to go, or if it's a repeating injury type of thing. But the start of his career actually kind of reminds me of Deshaun Elliott's, where he had a broken wrist, freak incident here, freak incident there. So I mean, when you look at Oliver, I'm not too disturbed. Obviously, he has to prove it, but it's not like he's playing on bad knees or something of that nature. Broken
Right.
tailbone sounds kind of, man, that must have been painful. Broken tailbone, and and the other one was a
Yeah.
broken foot. So very odd injuries. You don't usually see those. And then I do remember in the draft him having a little bit of speed, and he's built a certain way. I mean, obviously to get drafted out of a smaller school that high in the third round, he has some athletic qualities. And the one thing I have to ask you, I read in the piece, you had an interesting comparison that might surprise people. Can you give me that comparison, and can you tell me some of the little things besides the body type that remind you of him?
Yeah, blast from the past is Julius Thomas from Denver in the latest incarnation of Peyton Manning's high-profile offenses, high-scoring offenses at the end of his career. But like, if you look at physically, I think Thomas and maybe you'd appreciate this, Jason, because I know you're a draft guy. Because I think about Julius Thomas and Oliver's physiques, like to me, they have broader or wider chest frames, right? Like so, sometimes these
Yeah,
tight ends they're 6'5", 6'6", but like Darren Waller, for example, he looks like a small forward. Like he looks like Scottie Pippen, but I think of Julius Carl Malone type, where they're big, they're strong. I think Oliver's actually about 10, and I made a point of this. He's about 10 pounds lighter than Julius Thomas was. But then again, that's something where Oliver could add some more weight. And I think, yeah, physique-wise, to me, they look kind of similar. Games kind of similar, slippery. Thomas with those basketball skills can go high point the football. He did that. He did that quite a bit on the Ravens.
yeah, he did.
A few times. I think he had a couple jump ball touchdown or a couple jump ball touchdowns. But and then the other similarities are kind of eerie. Just the fact that both players came out of small schools. I think Thomas came out of Portland State, was drafted in the fourth round, but also was shelved for 2 seasons. His first 2 seasons did nothing. And then 2013 comes around, Peyton Manning takes over at quarterback, and he's the second tight end. I think that he wasn't even the first tight end, if I'm not mistaken. And he just did a number on the Ravens for that 7-touchdown onslaught. So, yeah, I mean, there's some similarities. I know people are going to go, well, he's not Julius Thomas yet. Let's let the guy play a game, let him get a snap in. I get it, but Julius Thomas was a number 2 tight end, so that's a perfect example, though, of someone who kind of rose up the depth chart and just got an opportunity and made the most of it and had the talent to do that.
Yeah, I think that's great information. Julius Thomas was a really good player. For those who don't remember, and a red zone threat, Dev. Like, it seemed like when
Yes.
Peyton Manning got down there, he didn't have the arm he had earlier in his career, and Julius Thomas was one of those guys you'd find on fantasy teams with 4 or 5 catches, 50 yards, but 2 touchdowns or something like that. Like, I could see Josh Oliver being a red zone threat because I remember looking at him in 2019, and he did have kind of that basketball skills, but I think that you described it to me as he was more of a power forward, than anything else, where he's using his body to kind of body people out. But he ran a 4.6 too, which is not slow for a tight end.
No.
So I mean, if he's got that kind of speed, enough speed to challenge linebackers, to get them to turn their back, and then of course he's got the height. I think Oliver's what, 6'4", 6'5", something like that. He plays tall.
Yeah, he's. I think he's in that 6'5" range. I got it right in front of me, but let me double check. So
I might
I'm
have it
not
too.
off by then. But he's 6'5". Yeah, so 6'5", 250. I talked about Waller before, was 6'6". So he's a big dude. Oliver's a big guy. If you watch and if you, I mean, I know you dove in the college game film, which there's not much that I found, but just what's out there. Yeah, he is definitely good with his ability to position himself, use his body. But to your point, he's crafty and kind of sneaky. I know in terms of getting downfield and getting further downfield at second level on seam routes. So I think he's got the ability to kind of hit you in a number of ways. In the red zone, for sure, I could see him. That's a quick win for him immediately in this offense, potentially, if he makes the team.
Yes, I could see him if he can threaten as a blocker, like we mentioned earlier. I could see him sneaking into the end zone in these tight end heavy sets by the goal line. But what did you
Yep.
have any questions about his game other than the injuries? Like what would he have to show to you to make the team?
He absolutely. I mean, we get back to the blocking. That's where he's going to have to prove himself. And Greg Roman almost kind of put the gauntlet down for him earlier in this offseason and talked about, yeah, he's athletic, but if you can't block, and this is his quote, if you can't block a defensive end or a linebacker, you're a fake tight end, which was a really cool, I guess, quote. In a sense, it's almost it sounds like a wrestling quote. But yeah, but he did follow it up by saying he's got the chance to be a real tight end and he's got some strength. And I think he's in the right place for developing his blocking skills with this coaching staff. And I think they'll get the most out of him. And it could just be a situation where and I think in college, and he's also a former receiver. So I think he was put in positions where he was flanked out wide. He was moved around in the slot. He just didn't have to get himself. He didn't have to get down in the trenches as much. But yeah, they have Nick Boyle, but Mark Andrews is better off the line. So they may ask, in theory, if Oliver makes the team, but it's going to have to be he's going to have to be able to prove himself as a blocker, and I think special teams as well as the other thing. Just and his competition is Ben Mason, who's already a proven special teamer coming out of college, albeit coming out of college, but he's terrific. So that's something the Ravens have identified. Eric Tomlinson's a better blocker. So if we were to look at those two, almost like we'll put it like issues or two kind of challenges that he's going to have to overcome, Oliver's going to have to overcome, it's blocking and special teams, because I think they know what they have in him as a pass catcher.
It's a good point. Like he doesn't have to be as great of a blocker as those two, but he's got to be capable to give himself a chance to be a receiving threat. Because if you can't do both, like you
Exactly.
said, that's a pretty strong quote from Roman. It does sound like, hey, we like what you. It almost like if I was Josh Oliver, I'd see that as a vote of confidence. Like, hey
Yeah,
man,
absolutely.
he must like me if he's saying that up there and challenging me in public. Like you went from conditional seventh round pick guy to, hey kid, you want to make this team? We're gonna need you to block. So I would actually like that if I was Oliver. The fact that he's thinking about
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah, there's no reason why the offensive coordinator or the team is going to go out of his way to be that specific in his comments, right? I mean, you have
yeah.
general canned responses that he could have given, like, "Oh, well, we'll see him compete," something to that effect. But he was very, to your point, the praise was there, but also it's kind of the carrot was also out there, like, "All right, this is what you have to do." I agree. I think it was a motivational tactic.
So Dev, we keep our videos short here with 10, 15 minutes. Is there anything you could say in conclusion, like how you shape it up? I mean, it's way early. The pads haven't come on, but what kind of odds do you give him for snatching that third, fourth tight end job?
Yeah, I think he's got better than 50. Maybe I'm biased, but I think he's got better than 50% chance. To the points that we just made, I mean, Greg Roman, he knows what he wants. Like, this trade was made, I think, with some idea that they really could have used a second tight end that has some serious pass catching ability. I think they missed that last year. That's a hole and a mismatch opportunity that Roman would want to utilize. So I give him pretty good odds that he'll make the team. The key, of course, is he's got to stay healthy. And it also comes down to numbers and kind of which positions do they value in terms of numbers. So he could be caught in a numbers game, but they have to keep him on the team, Jason. They don't have stash opportunities like they do with some of the other guys. So that could give him a leg up. And I think that he'll ultimately make the team as long as he shows that he can stay healthy and he improves in those areas we talked about.
All right, Dev, that sounds great, man. I'm going to try to have you back on if you're willing. And I thank you so much for your time. Football's family, my friend. And I'm sure I'll see you around and be reading your work. Thank you.
Likewise, pleasure. Thanks for having me.